So this morning, I get the opportunity to thank our community, both those of you who are physically here and those who are listening in, for your generous support of Friends Church. A few months ago, when all the news hit and we began realizing some of the consequences of this virus and what it might mean for us as a community, I got to tell you, as one of the leaders, there were some white-knuckle moments not knowing what that would mean for us financially. And I think the board, our whole leadership team, were just kind of bracing for what we thought could be a very dark time for this organization. And here we are 3 months in, and we have more monthly supporters than we had going into COVID. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. Yeah, we're so grateful, and the support that you people have given this community, it is just unprecedented. And we don't have any words except we just got to say thank you. Thank you so much for wanting this community to thrive in the midst of everything going on. And, it feels weird to all of you who are sitting here physically today. I both have to tell you not to sing, and I have to tell you not to give as well, all right? At least not physically. We don't have no black box here. We can't control who touches it and all that kind of thing. So preventative measures prevent us from being able to put a black box out there. But for those of you who might be listening, those of you here who maybe give in a one-time kind of way, we invite you to give online. We'll allow you to do that, all right? Just go ahead and jump in there and do it. If you haven't signed up for pre-authorized giving, that, I got to tell you, is one of the greatest gifts you can do for this organization. It allows us to plan. We know what's kind of coming in on a monthly basis and allows us to be good stewards of that money and resource and plan effectively. We've done a masterful job, I would say, Vince, and on the financial side of things, expense side, we have hacked and slashed, and so we sit today in a great place, and I'm grateful to report that, and that is both from the revenue side, those that support us, and from the expense side, everyone's doing their part. So anyways, good news, and let me thank you again for doing all that you do. If you have never supported us before and you would like to, you can go online on our website, you can hit the donate button, or you can do it through our app. Let me just say, this app, if you haven't been introduced to it, it's just a Friends Church Calgary app. You can go online to your favorite apps provider and just type in Friends Church Calgary. It'll come up. You'll see our little spiritual gym logo. Click on it, download it. It gives you, answers any questions you might have, as well as gives you the opportunity to give online. So that's all I got to say. We are in for a treat this morning. Vince has a great message. Why don't you put your hands together and welcome the guy, hey? Yeah.
Normally I don't like that crap, but to have you all here and to hear you, I'll take it any day of the week. As I was coming in, I was talking to a few of you, and Dave says, I was like, Dave, I haven't seen you for in 3 years. He's like, what are you talking about? I see you every week. And I realized, oh yeah, I talk to an empty crowd, but you guys feel like you're here. So before I get going, I just want to brag on some people if I can, and I want you to just go bananas and give them a hand. Our tech teams have been busting ass, and yes, that's the appropriate word in church, busting ass, to keep this thing going every week, trying to make it better and fixing stuff. So the stream team, today we have Krista, multimedia team, Ryan, sound team, we have Marco, and everyone at home. You guys are amazing. Thank you. And then we had a whole team today come in, First Impressions, who I told them, anything you ever knew about First Impressions, throw it out. It's COVID time, we're changing all the rules. So they built a system to try and get you in here, keep you safe, make sure you don't get too close to each other, because that's bad, right? So thank you very much. Where is it? Oh, there they are. Dawn and Jen and Lindsay, thank you guys. And a huge shout out to the people in the balcony. I stuffed you back there because you're older, and they'd say we have to separate you. Isn't that brutal? Boo to separating people who are older. But it's so good to see your guys' faces up there. Okay, what am I talking about today? Jeez. I'm all excited to have you guys here. I can't even remember. So, we looked, oh, that's right. So, now that we're in streaming land. I can't walk around. But you guys know I can't think and stand still at the same time. It doesn't work for me. So let me try and do this. We're coming to this time as a city, as a world, where it feels like we're coming out of hibernation, doesn't it? For a long time, we've been stuck at home. Some of us have been working, but even that, everything feels different. If someone touches a door handle and I go after them, I'm doing like the grab with my shirt kind of nonsense, right? Right now, probably people feel more strange than they ever have that I can remember. And so we're at this time where we're trying to come out of isolation into a new world and meeting people who we may know, may have seen, might have felt safe before, but now suddenly things feel different. They feel strange to us. And so we built a series, we called it Stranger Danger. This natural instinct inside of us to see somebody other than us, other than the people in our group, as a little bit dangerous. Add to that what we've been dealing as a society around racism and around all the different issues we're dealing with right now. We feel that this is the most important thing to talk about right now. So today I want to do something, I want to take you guys through a series of thoughts to kind of take one piece of this puzzle that I want to explore today. I've been thinking about this for years, so if I get a little excited, it's because I'm really passionate about this message. But ultimately what I want to do is I want you guys to think deeply. I'm not here to tell you an answer. I'm not here to show you the right way to go. What I'm here to do is to get you to ask questions. Okay, I'm going to do this once more, but it's just so good to see your guys' faces right now. I just got to say. I'm walking, anyways. Okay, so let me start it this way. I tend to have a lot of fun in my life, and when I was a kid, I was no different. Jumping my BMX, climbing out of trees, you name it, playing sports. And anyone who has that kind of background knows that you tend to get beat up a little bit. So I've had a lot of stitches in my life. I think I only know one person who's had more than me, but we're talking, I think I'm in the 70-plus range last time I counted. And so this is right at the beginning of my stitching career, where I'd come in like covered in blood, just covered in blood. And I'd be like, I don't need stitches, I don't need stitches. And my mom, who didn't deal with blood, was like, go see your father. And my dad would come and look at it and he'd be like, you could just, I know now what he's doing. He's like, oh geez. But he's like, we'll see, we'll let the doctor decide for you, right? Go to the doctor, of course I have to get stitches. So they stitch me up. I'm this little kid with massive hair, this big blonde afro, and I'm fighting like mad, and the nurses are holding me down, my dad's holding me down, the doctor's got trying to stitch me up. So I didn't love stitches back in those days. Nowadays I'm a little more ambivalent, but back in those days, a 10, 12-year-old kid, not cool. So one day, I get stitches in the top of my head, and my dad takes me back after because the doctor's supposed to take them out. So we walk in the hospital. Again, I am skittish. I don't like this. I don't like stitches. I don't like anything to do with this. And my dad walks in and says, we need to get the stitches out. So they go and find the nurses, but all the nurses seem to be busy. And I've always had these amazing nurses, just the kindest, most loving people. They'd give me a sucker after I got stitches. I'm a drain on the healthcare system, and they reward me with a sucker. How cool is that? So now I come in, my dad, my dad's dragging me, and I'm pulling behind. And my dad says, son needs to get his stitches out. Anyone here can do it? And they're looking around kind of like this. And out of the back office, after a couple minutes, this old dude walks out. He's the only nurse there. And I swear, I was 10, so he was 90 years old. But I remember him, I distinctly remember, they sit me down on a chair. He rolls up the little silver stainless steel thing with all the instruments on it. And I look at his hands, and they're shaking so bad. If he was trying to drink a cup of coffee right now, he would be wearing most of that coffee. And my little 10-year-old brain's looking at his fingers, shaking like that, and thinking, oh, this is not going to go well. Now, for those of you who've never had stitches, this is the way it works. They have a little clamp. They grab one end of the stitch with the little clamp. Then they take a little scissors, they sneak it underneath between your skin and the stitch, snip it, and they pull it out. It's this really weird feeling of a piece of string going through your skin. It's really weird. But anyways, that's how they do it. I see the guy pick up the clamp, and it's like the back end of it's just vibrating. And it takes him a couple of shots to actually get to the stitch, but he finally clamps it onto the stitch. But now he's shaking so bad, this thing is like ripping the stitch out of my head, and I'm trying to compensate by shaking my head so that he doesn't tear the thing out of my head before he even gets the scissor into the thing to cut it. But you know what, folks? I know the very millisecond he gets that scissor in there, because he doesn't get it underneath the stitch the first time. He sticks it into my head the first few times. I am bleeding. This guy's yanking the stitch out while he shakes. My dad's holding me down. I'm losing the plot, right? I am freaking out. I got blood coming off this thing. We spend the next probably half an hour as Joe Shaky Hands basically tears the stitches out of my head. I've had a lot of stitches in my life. I've spent a good bit of time in the hospital. I've always had fantastic nurses. The nurses have always been women until that day when I met Mr. Shaky Hands. What do you think my brain did with little, like, tearing the stitch out, stabbing me with the scissor? The only male nurse I ever had in my life at that point, the only male nurse, was the most painful experience of my life. That's an exaggeration. But it hurt more than stitches going in, I'll tell you that. You see, here's the interesting thing. Our brains make patterns. They don't judge. They don't do anything. They just go, that person hurt me in this way. That person is unique because all the other nurses I've had, all women. Lovely. They gave me suckers. Awesome. The one nurse that hurt me, the only difference between that nurse and all the rest, it's a dude. Fast forward 25 years. I was climbing, had a bad communication time with my belayer, came off the rock and hit a dead tree. Got a stick stuck through the back of my leg, up through the front of my leg. So, not an awesome thing to have happen, right? We're out in the middle of nowhere, I yank it out, we go to the doctor, it's like wide open. It was so funny. They only let me sit in the waiting room for about 10 minutes. Half the staff in the emergency room came to see it because they'd only ever seen a wound like that in a textbook. I was like, why are you all coming to look at this? They're like, we've never seen this before. This is awesome. I was like, how did it end up in the textbook? And they're like, ooh. I'm like, okay, I don't want to talk about that. Anyways, go in. The doctor's fantastic. He used to be a GP. He's training to become an emergency room doctor. He takes about an hour to stitch me back together. His stitching's a little shoddy. He probably should go back to seamstress school or whatever he needs to do, but he finally gets it all back together. You know, I can't even bend my leg anymore. 38 stitches, I think. And I'm going, okay, the worst is over, right? I've pulled the stick out of my leg. I hiked half an hour with the back of my leg open. I got to the hospital. They stitched me all back together. It's good. And I'm sitting there. I remember sitting on the gurney, so I roll back over in the room, and I'm sitting kind of like this because I can't straighten my leg anymore. And what I didn't realize is once you get stitches like that, you're not done when they put the stitches in. There's one more step. You get to see what's called the bandaging nurse. And I distinctly remember sitting there thinking it's over, you know, like the bad stuff's over. And in walks a male nurse. I can still see him. He's the cockiest looking SOB I've ever seen in my life. And it's not only is he cocky, at the same time, he feels like he couldn't give two shits about this job. And he doesn't. The tetanus shot he gives me, you know how they normally stick it in slowly? It's like he's stabbing me with adrenaline. Wham! Just slams the needle in. I'm like, ah! I've just had 38 stitches. This is more painful than that. Then he has this little sock he needs to put on me to hold everything in place. I don't know what he's doing. And he's treating me like a 3-year-old who doesn't want to put on his socks. I'm trying to do it so that I don't scream in pain and this thing doesn't tear open and we have to go through this all again. And he just reefing it on. I swear to you, it was more painful than getting a stick shoved through my leg. What do you think my brain did with that moment? I've had 2 male nurses in my life. One was Mr. Shaky Hands, half tore the bloody stitches out of my head. And then we have Mr. I don't care about you. What pattern do you think my brain made from those two experiences? You see, here's the thing. Our brains are pattern-making machines. That's what they do. It's not that they choose to do this. It's not that you deliberately make a pattern, although you can. It's your brain makes patterns whether you want them or not. It makes connections between things that it thinks will hurt you and what group it is that will hurt you. And it can be hurt, can be physical, it can be social, it can be emotional. Let's take it to a really kind of uncomfortable place. Let's say you're in a small town, let's say southern Manitoba where I grew up, and there's one town drunk. You all know the town drunk, right? Always doing stupid stuff, always looking like an idiot, always being, just inappropriate. Let's say the entire town is white, and the town drunk is a person of color. Or let's say the town is are all people of color, and the one town drunk is white. What do you think your brain does? You don't necessarily want it to do this. You don't choose to make this happen, but what do you think it does? We all look like this. We all are normal. That person looks different. That's the town drunk. What pattern do you think is made in your brain? Let's say the town drunk's white. Let's say you go to the next town, and the cop that pulls you over is a bit of a jackass. They had a bad day, and he also is a white dude. What pattern do you think your brain's made? Without you deciding, without you asking for it to do it, without any control, it's now making a pattern between white people and bad. And the next time you go to the hospital and a male nurse walks in, you have this reaction that's like this. Ugh. And it doesn't necessarily even need to be an experience that you do. Remember I told you a couple weeks ago, I'm from a Mennonite community. And there's different kinds of Mennonites, because even if you're all white, you have to figure out who's in and who's out. It's just the way it goes. But there's a group called Mexican Mennonites. And our family said those are bad. You can't trust them. They smell funny. I didn't meet my first Mexican Mennonite until I was in grade 6. But what do you think pattern was in my brain? I heard the accent and I went, oh. I know that pattern. My family taught me that pattern. Let's say we all watch similar TV, or it's the media, whatever, news, whatever, fill in whatever blank. And certain groups of people, let's say a certain occupation, always is portrayed a certain way. You've maybe never met somebody of that occupation, but on TV or in the news, always the same. Those people are untrustworthy, snakes, whatever. What pattern do you think's in your brain from that? You may never have even met somebody like that, and your brain has been conditioned to find a pattern by the news you see and the media you consume. When I say you, let's be honest, all of us. And if our brains are pattern-making machines, they're finding patterns all over the place. So let me ask you this. I'm not going to get you to share. No raising of your hands. Please just keep this to yourself. But be honest. What patterns do you have in your brain around race? Those people are smart, quick, strong, lazy, untrustworthy, scary, violent. When you think about, let's say, colored people, when you think about people, how about who are white? What patterns has your brain made? When you look at a group of people who are other than your group, what patterns are going on in your brain right now? Let's fine-tune it even more. I don't know anybody who identifies as black that's my age. I don't have any friends that way. But I had some amazing professors when I went through Bible school, seminary. In my brain, old black men are wise. Because man, my teachers, they were sharp. When I look at old black men, the pattern in my brain is wise. Any random black man who's old walks up to me, starts talking, my first reaction will be like, you're probably sending me gold, so I'll pay attention. People my age and younger don't know any. All I have is what I see on TV and in the news. What do you think pattern's there? What if we do gender? Whatever you identify, look at the opposite gender. What do you think about that gender? They are. You saw me. Male nurses don't care about inflicting pain. That's the pattern in my head. Now, it's not because I've seen all male nurses, it's because I had two experiences separated by 25 years, but my brain doesn't care. It drew a line between those two and said, wow, look, there's a pattern. What patterns are made when you think of your own gender? We are less than, more than, strong, weak, emotional, logical. Occupation, sexual orientation, gender identity. I could break it up a million different ways, and each one we can break up further and further, but as we look at this, you'll notice that your brain has a pattern. Those people are like that. My people are like this. I want to go on a limb here today and suggest something. I'm going to suggest, and again, this is contrary to some thinkers, so I know I'm going on a line, so if you want to ignore everything I say, just disagree with me right here, and you're golden. You can ignore everything else I have to say. I don't think we need to judge that our brains make patterns. I don't actually think it's helpful that we judge the patterns that our brains are making. Just because I had two bad experiences with nurses, and you can, every time I say it, I kind of want to qualify and be like, but people, I do like male nurses. I'm sure I just have, I want to do all this kind of song and dance. But the reality is that pattern's there. And if I don't judge it, if I just understand it, what can I do with it? I had this old right-hand drive truck from Japan. Piece of crap truck. So brutal. But because I drove here, I always drove, my butt was sitting in the right tire track. Right? Right-hand drive, right tire track. Well, the second I would start doing something, I've driven on the other side for most of my life. The second I start doing, getting something to eat or something on my phone, I would slowly start to drift so my butt was in the other tire track. So I'm now driving down the center of the highway. Not awesome. But at the beginning, I didn't know I was doing it. I'd get up and be like, whoa, back in the beginning. Okay, we're good. But the thing is, pretty quickly I realized, the second you stop paying attention, you're going to drift. Because I knew that I could do something about it. Right? I'd lean over to get something. I'd scooch the car the other way because I knew I was going to try and get it into there. I kind of scooch the car the other way, and I'd come back and I'm like, oh, look, there I am, right in this where I'm supposed to be. If we can see the patterns our brains make, there's a chance we can do something about them. And what I've seen time and time again is we're suppressing these patterns so deeply because we don't like them that people won't even admit that they have them. That's why I don't want to tell you that I'm scared of male nurses. Because if one of you is a male nurse, I have to go and apologize after and say, I'm so sorry, this is brutal, I apologize. But if you know the pattern you have, if you know the pattern your brain has, you can do something about it. And that's what I want for us. The ability to make better choices. Because just because I have a pattern in my brain does not mean I have to let that pattern run my life. Because it will run your life. There's a beautiful study. This is like, when you think about all the money that goes into research and you sometimes wonder why so much money goes there and what are they doing with it? This is like literally what I think is the worst sounding study in the history of the world. Because here's what they did. They put people in brain scanners. So just think about yourself in a brain scanner. They have a table in front of you with a button. There's nothing for you to look at. There's no movies. There's nothing. They just say, I want you to sit there, and when you feel like hitting the button, hit the button. They paid people to do this. That's tax money at work, right? So you sit there like, no. Okay, I want to hit the button. Wham! And you'd say, I want to hit the button, and then you hit the button. And what the people in the study thought was going on was we were measuring the distance between when I said, I want to hit the button, and hitting the button. That's not what the researchers were checking. See, after the first few times that somebody hit a button, they figured out what part of your brain was going to control hitting the button. Then what they did is they said this, let's measure when that part of your brain fires and see when it happens in relation to when you think you want to hit the button. Here's what they found. Your brain decided to hit that button up to 7 seconds before you realized you wanted to hit the button. You're all looking at me like, so seriously, your brain has made up its mind about something, we're going to hit that button. Up to 7 seconds later, you're conscious of the reality that says, oh, I think I want to hit the button. Oh, no. Your brain already wanted to hit the button a while ago. It's just waiting for you to catch up. Once you've hit the button, that's the end of a series of things that has already started at the beginning. That's the pattern part of your brain. It's already decided what it wants you to do. The pattern part is actually running how you behave. And so if that part is unexamined, think of all the patterns that are running your brain. Think of the patterns that are running your life. I walk into the hospital with a broken arm. I see a male nurse walk up to me. My first reaction is, oh, I probably didn't break it. I'll just go home. It's not that bad, right? There's blood spurting out of it. I'm like, I'll be fine. I'll just put a Band-Aid. It'll be good. Think of all the other things that you do through your life. The patterns. The researchers said this. Many processes in the brain occur automatically without involvement of our consciousness. So basically, those patterns are running most of your life. This prevents our minds from being overloaded by simple routine tasks, but when it comes to decisions, we tend to assume they are made by our conscious mind. And we have to have it this way because there's too much to think about. But what about those patterns that don't fit who you want to be? Do I want to go to a hospital and pick my nurse based on their gender? No. That's not who I am. I believe that anyone can do anything. And the idea that some gender is good at this job and that gender can't do it, that's brutal. I feel horrible about thinking that way. So here's what we've done. We've talked about patterns. Your brain's making them whether you know them or not. They're trying to save your life. They're trying to make your life easy. It's all good. I'm suggesting we don't judge them. We become aware of them. But what do you do when the pattern doesn't match who you are and who you want to be? I think the 12-step people have done a ton of work on this because they know that our brains have patterns that take us to an area that they don't want to be. And so a lot of the 12-step program is figuring out how to reframe those patterns, rewire them, rework them. And we can do the same. I walk into a nurse's office or a doctor's office, male nurse walks up to me. Rational Vince knows that this person probably is not bad just because they're male. So what do? I talk myself through it, right? I'm okay. They're okay. I've only ever had 2 bad male nurses. That's not all the male nurses in the world. I know we made a pattern with this, but I don't want to live this way, right? I'm talking myself out of it. And over time, what happens? Pretty soon I feel comfortable around male nurses. Our spiritual tradition actually has a way, I think, that they talk about this. Jesus says, it's easy to love your neighbors, love your friends, love the people around you, right? Love your partner. What's hard is loving your enemy. When I first heard that line, I thought it meant enemy like the people we're in war against, the people who've hurt me. I remember thinking, yeah, but why would I love them? But what if the enemy is the brain, the pattern that our brain identifies? That person is dangerous. That's our enemy. What if in my world it's love the male nurse? What if in your world it's whatever group feels uncomfortable for you? What if love your enemy is focused on that? Changing that brain pattern. Okay, I have one more way to change your brain, then I'm done. I used to have a house in the Northeast. Lovely little neighborhood, had this great house, big shop in the back. But I grew up in a small town in southern Manitoba where it was all Mennonites. So everyone had these funny accents, but I knew them. They're all like white Mennonites. And so now I'm in a community which is primarily East Indian people. And the East Indian people that was in my neighborhood, the elderly people walked all the time. I never saw a white person walk, East Indian people nonstop in front of my house. And they all walked like this, with these scowls on their faces. Just so you know, a scowl, your brain connects the scowl to danger. That pattern's already wired into you. Evolution put that one in for you. So if someone you love scowls at you, you will not feel great about that. And so here's all these people walking by my house with these scowls on my faces, and I'm like, they probably think I'm a horrible white person. And so I'd hide, because that's really mature, right? Oh, geez, run inside. So one day I'm climbed up in my tree, so I can't even run away, and I'm pruning my tree. And here walks this old dude, big turban, scowl, and this like craggy face, like the lines are all like, I've scowled my whole life, and I'm scowling at you, you idiot. And I'm sitting there, I can't get out of the tree, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, oh, geez. So I think, well, what would it look like to love him? And so I had this I'm 40, and I had this 15-year-old voice, hi. And then I tried to put this smile on my face that didn't look super creepy, although I'm sure it looked super creepy. And I remember the moment. He looks at me, and his smile gets massive. He's got these big white teeth. Like, hey, how you doing? I just remember the warmth in my heart of you weren't scowling at me. You're not dangerous to me. I'm probably feel dangerous to you. You don't know what to do with me. From that day on, anybody of any color walked by my house, I was like, hey, how's it going? And without fail, they were friendly. Do you know what I think about East Indian people now? Friendliest people out there. You see, if you have a pattern in your brain that you don't feel comfortable with, open up the data points. Get more experience. If tanned, bald gentlemen scare you, go meet some more tanned, bald gentlemen, right? Make friends with them. Go I don't know, is there clubs for tanned, bald gentlemen? There's got to be clubs for that, right? Go hang out with them. Oh, there we go, one over there too. Right? Any group that feels uncomfortable to you, go spend time with them. Our tradition has this beautiful thing from the Old Testament, the earliest part. It had this idea of the guest. The rule was, if anyone came to your house that didn't live with you, they were your guest, you brought them in your house. Didn't matter who they were. If they sat on the street across from your house, you run over, you grab them, you bring them over, you let them sleep in your house, you feed them, they are the honored guest. I think our tradition understood how to rewire our brain long before we figured out the science behind it. Because if every day you have new people coming in, those patterns your brain make, they get challenged, right? Suddenly, you're like, oh, these people are all like this, but wait a second, I know 5 other male nurses that are incredible. Oh. People of this race, or this group, or this gender, or this whatever your grouping is, you meet more people and suddenly you realize, wait, they're amazing people. You can literally rewire the pattern in your brain if you're open. Patterns aren't a bad thing. Some of them are there to protect us. You're walking through a sketchy neighborhood and you see a dark alley. There's a pattern in your brain that says, don't go down the alley. Yeah, don't go down the alley. Don't be like, Vince told me to screw with my patterns. I'm going down that back. No, don't. It's there to protect you. Don't do it. But there's some that make no sense. There's some that aren't serving us anymore. There's some that are hurting us. There's unconscious patterns that are taking us out of relationship, out of connection, out of a community that loves each other. We're seeing it larger, nationally. There's patterns that we have that we don't like. We don't have to live by those patterns. We can talk ourselves out of them. We can experience a broader spectrum of the world. I wanted to frame this conversation not as a stage 2 conversation where I said, okay, so here's your patterns, and you're bad for having them, and here's how you do it differently. That's stage 2, where I tell you what to do. We don't do that. What I tried to do today is say this: your brain will make a pattern. It's constantly making a pattern. I'm asking you to be conscious of them. Don't judge them. Don't try and suppress them. Don't be like, ooh, I can't, that's a bad one. That just means it's going to control you, and you're not going to be aware of it. What if we live these things with awareness? Like me in my car, I know as soon as I take my hand out of the steering wheel and stop paying attention, I will drift over into the middle of the road. I can compensate for that. I grew up in a community that didn't have East Indian people. I can compensate for that. You grew up with a group that whatever, the media showed you a group, whatever pattern in your brain, you can change it if you want. Friend Church exists to make the world a better place. We do it through us. Through challenging us to love, to be different in this world. And so my question for you is, what does love look like with the patterns in your brain? What do you need to do with them this week? Who do you need to meet? Who do you need to have a guest over in your house because you need to expand that pattern? Which pattern do you need to talk down and say, yeah, I know, brain, these people are scary, but I don't want to live that way. We don't need to live that way. I want to encourage each and every one of us, find your patterns. Compensate for them when they don't work. And let's love this world in a way that we've not experienced as a culture. Is that a fair way to end the July 5th message? It is so good to see you guys. So great to have you out here. I encourage anyone who feels safe, come on out. Jeff's up next week. He's going to start digging into these unconscious patterns that you don't even know you have, but you got them. And chances are they're figuring out, making decisions for you up to 7 seconds before you realize they're doing it. So you'll want to hear that one. Have a great week, everybody. Good to see you. Virtual hugs to everybody.